Welcome to the Massive Change Show. I'm Justin Foster.
And I'm Dr. Virginia Lacayo. In each episode, we have conversation with leaders who are getting in some good trouble by challenging paradigms and shaking the system.
And after each conversation, the episode shifts to the second show, where Virginia and I chat about what we learned from the guest.
If you know of any leaders who will make a great guest, please introduce us.
And of course, if you enjoy the show, please like, share, and leave a review.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Brandon Peele. Thank you so much for being on the Massive Change Show. I would love to have you start off by telling a little bit of your story. And we're going to obviously link to your bio and website and everything. But in particular, this beautiful, very, very interesting how I found you actually. This model or book concept framework called Bison Medicine. I'd love to open with you talking about how you came up with that and how you kind of operate in the world these days, and then we'll get into the system shaker questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good to be with you, Virginia and Justin. So the short of it is I grew up without much purpose and meaning in my life, meaning privileged white guy from the Midwest, scholar athlete, went to a good school, started my career in investment banking, like on this kind of regular, boring ladder to success, right? And I was bored. I was really bored. Like the 80s and 90s were kind of boring for me in that it felt like all the exciting stuff had already happened, like civil rights, given my tiny little brain at the time. Like I was like, oh, the civil rights movement's over. We know it's very far from over.
Yes.
And, rock and roll and free love. And like, here we've got the AIDS crisis. We've got Reagan, Bush, it's just like, oh, it's so boring. So in my late 20s, began to do my own inner work to understand myself, heal my childhood wounds, and discovered after some period of time, about 7 years kind of into the inner journey, like this body of work called purpose work. And so it's primarily about having people create this marriage between ego and soul. So the part of you that knows your purpose, your soul, and then the ego that effectuates it. You just kind of, marry them, essentially. It's like a rite of passage, if you will. And when I experienced, I was like, this is a civil right. Everyone needs to do this, because without this sort of level of integration, we're susceptible to all sorts of terrible things. Mostly by institutions and dynamics and people that don't have our best interests at heart. So I became this kind of like purpose cheerleader of sorts. I was like, hey, everyone do this. It's awesome. Like aggregating the science on it, building this international community of practice, getting trained, writing books on it, all that kind of stuff. And I was pretty much content to like ride that out. I had no I was like, this is enough for me, like just to help people find their purpose, help organizations fulfill their purpose. But as we shared earlier, when George Floyd was murdered, that just dropped this kind of very one love, all humanity, wake up kind of thing into like, oh, we don't have the conditions for anything here. Not purpose, the least of them. Like we don't have life, we don't have liberty, we don't have equality, we don't have justice. And not that I was ignorant of that stuff. I'd read Zen and marched and done trainings and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't feel like my fight. But then something about Derek Chauvin just kind of like, he looks like me, right? He like looked right into the camera and just murdered a guy for like 9 minutes.
Exactly.
I was like, what the heck? So that's what kind of like brought me down into like Turtle Island, into the soil that I'm on, and not just this idea for everybody. And as you shared earlier, wrote this book, this kind of love letter to the American people, like we're better than this. I mean, not like in the trait way, but like we have a very spiritual, important task to perform for ourselves and hopefully all of life. And so that's the impetus for Bison Medicine.
Wow. So how does that manifest now from an entrepreneurial standpoint? Like, how do you, and it sounds very clinical or smoothies, but how do you monetize your own, like, your own journey? Because, you started, you're like a pioneer in the sense of, like, white dude doing inner work, that comes from privilege. A lot of times that, that was, I don't know how old you are, but probably around our age. But then you did that. And then, it's this second awakening almost that you had, that George Floyd's murder sparked. How do you entrepreneurialize that? That's probably the better word, besides having the book.
Yeah. So when I was a purpose guide, a fairly thriving business, I didn't make a ton of money, but like close to six figures, but not really there. And that, like I said, that was going fine. It was like, okay, great. But as you know, spend all this time marketing and so little time actually doing the thing that you want to be doing. So I ended up, I was just going to say, got lucky. Like, I found a purpose, values aligned kind of gig, if you will, where I facilitate executives to become their higher self. And that only takes 10, 15 hours a week. So I have like another 50 hours to like put my shoulder to the wheel on soul work. So the short answer is, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm like, I work for somebody, and then I also kind of get up to all this good trouble stuff around Bison Medicine. So there isn't really a big business model there yet. There could be.
Okay.
I mean, could be merch. There could be weekends. I don't know.
Yeah.
But not focused on that.
That's good. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I just was curious because I don't, in our intro call, I don't think we covered that. Virginia, do you have any preamble questions for Brandon before we dive into the first big one?
Yeah, this is my English second language kind of questions. So how you spell the title? Bison Medicine?
Yeah, Bison, Bison, and then medicine.
Like a buffalo.
Yeah, that's what I figured, but I wanted to make sure. And where that title come from?
So the United States in 2016 adopted the bison as our national mammal, which, nobody really knows. Like maybe less than 1% of the population knows. And in May, but there's going to be a 10-year celebration up on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota around that. So a few months before that, in February of 2016, I did a quest on the land as part of this 8-month purpose guide certification training. And one of the questions that I brought with me on the quest was like, what is my true name? And what came through was this name, Buffalo Heart, who loves and wholes the world, like to make whole the world. And the guidance is like not to like rush to do anything about it, just like hold it, like let it, bat around, let it kind of like teach you in a sense. And so I didn't rush to do anything about it. I carved its name into like a piece of wood and like just kind of left it there at my altar. And then like 2 months later, I read the New York Times, President Obama signs into law the National Bison Legacy Act, a unanimous bipartisan support. The two co-sponsors, William Lacey Clay, Democrat out of Missouri, and one of our favorite folks, Christine Noem, then the representative out of South Dakota.
Wow. South Dakota,
yeah. So this thing becomes law, or becomes, it's really not law. It's a symbol and saying like, but it didn't really offer any protection. So as I'm diving deep into U.S. history, and not just our history, but like the soul and the shadows. Like, what was the spirit of the law? Like why beyond just kind of freedom from the crown and the freedom to enact genocide on natives? Like what was the goodness in it?
Yeah.
And so this is like 4 years after kind of getting this kind of Bison Medicine type download of sorts. And as I started to study the behavior of the bison, I found that like their behavior is a much better match for our stated purpose of all created equal, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, for e pluribus unum, to love each other as much as ourselves, than our national bird, which is the eagle, the bald eagle swoops down from on high to steal, scavenge, exploit. So like steals from other birds. In the Pacific Northwest, they call them dumpster rats because they just like, or no, sky rats. It's always like scavenging. And yeah. And then it takes the booty back to its protected perch for the enjoyment of its kin and kin alone, very far away from the consequences of its actions. And again, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the bald eagle or any raptor for that matter. They're vital to many ecologies. But as a symbol for human behavior, for shared purpose, I'm going to drop my first story. That's a shitty symbol. That is a really shitty symbol for now 330 million diverse U.S. citizens who are trying to effectuate equality, justice, life, and liberty. So I make a very impassioned plea in the book, like, we need to follow the guidance of the bison because they're more courageous, they're protective, they're regenerative, they're inclusive. They have all of these qualities that a grown-ass adult needs. And specifically, a grown-ass adult on Turtle Island, up to the task of multiracial liberal democracy, must have that. So this book is really trying to center or use the bison as a navigational metaphor to seduce the American people back into like a sense of hope and possibility and solidarity.
Wow. Just being a nerd. Sorry, Virginia.
No, I'm so glad I asked the question. This is beautiful. I mean, this obviously we're inviting everyone to read the book, and we need that kind of role model. I would say, like, what we metaphors are extremely powerful to guide people imaginary and and vision and aspiration. Is like, okay, what should we look like? So having someone like that is well described and is like these are, and is possible and is relatable is amazing.
Yeah,
I think so. Thank you.
And you and I kind of bonded over this in our intro call, Brandon. I love history, and the bison, American bison, is interesting as a mammal because it like, unlike cows or other herd animals, when there's a storm, it runs towards the storm. And biologists don't know why. It doesn't run away. It turn, like a big herd will turn and run towards the storm, which is like, well, there's a symbol of leadership. And also, do you know what they almost became the symbol of the United States besides the eagle? What Ben Franklin was the main proponent of this particular creature. Do you know what it was?
I believe it was the turkey, right?
The turkey, yeah. Which probably better. So
definitely, and it's one of the few it's native to the United States, whereas like bison are on all of the continents.
Yeah. Where did you, when you had this download, where were you geographically? What area were you in?
So I was at this I think it's called Rivers Bend. It was this like retreat center up in Mendocino or Sonoma County, and
Northern California.
In this like 9-day intensive as part of this 8-month training, and so we're preparing and fasting and doing all the stuff you do for a quest. Which is weird because like bison actually aren't native to places that they're not native.
Right. Yeah. And in the Sioux and the Cheyenne, they were born, they were given a name related to kind of like their personality. And then they went on the vision quest and they received their name like you did. And I don't think most people realize that. So like Sitting Bull, one of the most famous Native Americans, his given name was Slow because he was kind of, he was not athletic apparently. And then he has his vision quest and sees this buffalo. Anyway, it's just, I could talk about that all day long, but let's go back to Virginia and then taking it from there to talk about like this. Yeah. Let's get into like the kind of agitation you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. So the first question that we ask our system shakers is, what is that big idea that you have that will probably piss off a lot of powerful people. Hopefully, not probably, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, it's what's her name? I forget, the feminist from the 70s. She said something like, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. So my hope is for all you rich, powerful people, this might piss you off first, but it will set you free. And I can't take credit for this idea. This is just what's so. So democracy has never existed in any sustainable way outside of an intact culture or spiritual alignment, if you will. So the longest, oldest democracy, the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace, the Kairnekoa, was within this kind of deist animist spiritual worldview. And not worldview as a construct, but like that was reality. For like 95% of human history, everything was alive. It was only in the last 6,000 years we're like, the mind's a blank slate, or like the universe is a lifeless clock. Nobody in their right mind in an intact culture would ever say that. Like God is alive, Goddess is alive, however you want to say it. So the big idea, the one that is at the heart of Bison Medicine, at the heart of another great book called Spiritual Democracy, is that democracy works on three levels. The idea towards which that people are devoted. In our case, it's equality. What Lincoln called the ancient tenet the central tenet of our ancient faith. What Reagan called our heritage. What Obama called our birthright, the star that guides, the most evident of all truths. So it's like, that's the thing. That's the singular purpose of the United States. So if we're doing anything that's not making things more equal, we're standing outside the chapel. We're like actually working against it. We're like trying to like break down the chapel if we're not creating more equality through our actions. So you have this idea, this construct level. Then you have the political economy that effectuates it. So in our case, we said life, liberty, and happiness. The political economy that is devoted to providing these three things, helping us achieve them. And so that's the kind of on the level of material. And then you have the kind of the base layer, the social fabric, the culture, like the spiritual, intuitive knowing that like, oh, like I'm my brother's keeper. Like we become one when I love you as much as myself. Like that's the piece that we kind of just like skipped over a little bit. I mean, it was evident with like, Ben Franklin and, Jefferson, Washington, Paine had lots of connections with First Nations folks, worked intimately with them. They got that. Franklin argued for it, like, hey, we need this in the Declaration. We need this in the Constitution. Like, if we don't acknowledge the deity that is life, that is nature, we're SOL. And so, we talked about nature's God and natural law and capitalized them as though they were sacred. But then we didn't really do anything to ensure that happened. And so what we have is like a very sophisticated political economy, an idea on paper, but we haven't become the people required to fulfill a democracy. So we have to do this inner work. We have to become our brother's keeper, like recognize our bison nature.
Yeah. And it's interesting too that it's kind of a third way thing, is that there's this what I call white lies about the history of the country. And, I remember as a little kid, I was like fourth grade, and I asked my teacher, why are we celebrating Christopher Columbus? And I got sent to the principal's office, which began a lifelong pattern of being sent to the principal's office. So, and then there's this kind of like dark cynicism you see with kind of on the angry left, which, if we're to put it into like a political spectrum. But most people don't realize like those factors were there from the very beginning, and we'd never really resolved them. We never resolved the white supremacists that were part of the country, or the people that did come. They did come to the colonies to create a Christian nation, but that was a direct opposition to the natural law crowd, that were very influenced by like Francis Bacon, and then there was the inconsistency of Jefferson talking about liberty and being a slaveholder, or Washington fighting for freedom and being a slaveholder. And it's like that reconciliation has never happened. And this, and Virginia knows this too, part of spiritual maturity is reconciliation. It's the original word for repent. Repent doesn't mean what evangelicals think it means. It means recognizing you were going the wrong direction and going a different direction. and so it's like those things, those conversations that were happening back then, they never got resolved, and here we are. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, Virginia, as a freshly naturalized U.S. citizen, even though we don't live in the United States right now, what is that for someone that is from another countries? How does that sit with you? What we were just talking about there.
I think
Put
it's
you
a
on the
human.
spot.
Yeah, no, but I think I mean, I totally understand, and I share that, and I have gone through my own path, so I relate a lot to what you were saying. A different way of doing it, a different path, but at the end is kind of the same goal, is to align my core values, my true self, my soul, with my thoughts and my actions, and how that creates some kind of equilibrium that also reveal to me what is my role in this society, what is my contribution, how my true purpose has to be bigger than myself and my own benefits or privilege or well-being. So I relate to that. And as I have invested decades studying the human mind and the human behavior, and especially the collective behavior, why we behave the way we behave collectively and at the individual level, and the contradictions between what we stand for or what we say we stand for versus our behavior individually and collective. It's something that unfortunately I see is everywhere in the world. It's part of the humanity as humanity has evolved or devolved, I will say. The difference may be in other cultures, especially the global South. I'm going to be very specific, not the North. I'm not talking Europe. I'm not talking the global South, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. I mean, the global South is that we have a very strong culture still of community. And that shifts a little bit of things, because then community is as important, if not more important than the individual. And that forces the ego and the mind to understand and to behave in a different way, even though the internal conflict that we still have as humans. And the internal conflict that we have is what creates a lot of suffering, really. I mean, starting with boredom, that is the most innocent of suffering, but going all the way to psychosis, and that is the disconnection between the soul and the true self and the ego, and what the ego is trying to make us be and do. So that disconnection, and I so agree with you that you said the capacity of the skill of managing the mind, the thoughts, and the ego should be a civil right. I mean, it should be a human right. I remember when I was in this practice of helping people to understanding their mind and developing the skill of ego mastery, so they can really connect to their true self and they can really fulfill their purpose and be a true contribution to humanity. A guy that was Justin's friend put me on the spot on the first time I met him and the first time I met all his circle and his friends, actually. So I was like, like a chicken in a fox party. He put me on the spot and was like, oh, so you think that what you're doing is so important. So tell me more about it. And I was like, well, okay, trying to explain. And then he said, like, so if that is important, what will have to happen for your job and your mission to be completely irrelevant and unnecessary? I was like, wow, that was a tough question. And what I said is, the skills that I teach right now to young adults and adults should be something that is being taught from elementary school to every single human being. And if kids learn how to develop that spiritual awareness and how to manage their mind and their emotions and master their ego and it's not eliminating the ego, but put it into service of the true self, my job here is done. Obviously, it's not something I will accomplish in this life, but it's something that I agree that we should be a worldwide goal and aspiration, because it will make all the difference in the world. I mean, we will not be talking about any of the problems that we're having right now if that will be a thing. So I don't know if that answered your question, Justin, but
it did. Yeah, thank you.
Can I respond to that? Because that was beautiful.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, please, Brad, go ahead.
So this is something that like is going to sound super obvious, right? But it means that we have to have people who have done the work that Virginia was talking about. Becoming our higher selves, integrating our ego with our higher self. Democracy requires consent. Like you have to vote, right? You have to you pay taxes. Like you're consenting. If you haven't done the work to become a developmental adult, you're not actually giving your consent when you vote. Not actually giving your consent when you pay taxes, not actually giving your consent when you marry someone. And so like what we have, at least in the United States, let's speak for that area because I know it pretty well, is a nation of psychological adolescents who, walk around in these big bodies and like have this, great self-concept and, feel like we have free will, but we don't have free will. Unless we're actively investigating our subconscious and integrating our parts, we're not going to know where that voice comes from. Does it come from our higher self, or does it come from a part that's disintegrated, essentially severed? So this isn't just like Northern California navel gazing. Oh, we all need to realize our human potential. This is like a fundamental condition of consent. So to put a finer point on it, one of my favorite authors, this woman, Alicia Deva, wrote this book called Before War. She says that basically without these kind of conditions, there is no consensual sex. Like people are saying yes, but they're saying yes as a bargain to get something that they want based on somebody else's idea of who they should be. So it's like it starts to get really icky. Like we talk about rape culture in the United States. Yes, there's violent rape, and there's this like almost like it's like post-traumatic stress or complex traumatic stress that's like a whole society that is based on exploiting each other's adolescent fragilities. And so like if we want to become an adult, if we want equality, we first have to like become the types of folks who can actually advocate our own agency, our own free will. And that is a long journey.
Yes. Before we go to the follow-up question and the next question, Virginia, could you share the Spanish word for that alignment that you and Brandon are talking about? Because I think that's very important.
In Spanish, we use the word consecuente. That actually I spent 20 years living in the United States trying to find the literal translation of that, the word in Spanish, and it doesn't exist, which you have to forgive me, but says a lot about the American culture that we don't have a word that
Yes.
in one word, I mean, you can explain it, the alignment between this and that and the integration, but the fact that you have to explain it instead of having a word that describe it, for me at that time when I just moved was like, what does this mean? What does it say?
Yeah.
But consecuente, and especially when we said consecuente with oneself, consecuente conmigo misma means that I have agency and I have a free will, and that comes from having this alignment between what I think, what I feel, my values, my core self, and my actions and my results. And it's smooth, and there is this flow of things that don't create conflict or tension because it's consecuente. And so it's been translated like true to yourself, being in alignment. I don't know. I mean, there are ways to explain it, but still, you have to explain it. And to some people, in my experience, you have to invest like a couple of hours explaining the thing.
Exactly. Yes. And like even like Ubuntu, African word for unity or oneness. We have to go to other cultures, and I get asked a lot, like, what's the difference between Mexico and the United States? Obviously there's many differences and many similarities. But the biggest one is the U.S., especially white Americans, is a system that produced a culture around suburbia and entertainment and sports. And Mexico, and I've not been to other Latin American countries, so I can't make this claim for all everywhere, but I've experienced it here, is Mexico is a culture that produced a system. And within that system is kind of an inherent spirituality. Obviously, there's exceptions to that with, the cartels and some of the in power, over the years, the dictatorships and authoritarianism. But in many ways, it's my view that fascism is just the opposite of what the three of us are talking about: social emotional intelligence, critical thinking, mental resilience. That's fascism is just the opposite of those things. When it is just practiced in horrible, evil, violent ways. So anyway, as I told you, Virginia, we were going to have a very different conversation with Brandon than we typically do, because it's just,
Love it.
He's a thinker.
Exactly my kind of conversation.
Exactly. I knew you would love it. So going to the second system shaker question, this is specific to, I found you on LinkedIn, and I've been on a hunt for other, Gen X white men, American men that are like taking a stand in, tearing down the wall, especially on LinkedIn, between business and politics. And you are very inspiring because you're very direct, but you're not mean about it. You're consistent. And anyway, we'll link to your LinkedIn. You can see, people that are listening can see, like, you're a model for how to do this. So my question is, though, how do you handle the blowback? How do you handle the people that tell you you're full of shit, or how do you process that blowback both internally? One of the things about doing inner work, and it makes us a little bit sensitive sometimes to, like we're tender sometimes, hopefully, but also like, then how do you literally handle it from like a tactical standpoint?
I would say now I'm probably a lot more graceful than I was 15 years ago when I started popping off on LinkedIn and Facebook. So I tend to speak more from personal experience, more from kind of what's undeniable fact. And so that tends not to have a lot of folks, because, like you can't question somebody's experience. Like, it's like, my experience of doing this was X, Now, it still does happen, because, there's 20% of the United States that is just like diehard MAGA and will never abandon that social identity, basically. And so I just, this is going to sound, I don't know, maybe this probably is elitist. But what I say is, what is your understanding of the purpose of the United States? and nobody responds back because they don't know.
Right.
And I try to be like, it's like, tell me something. Like, make it about like, jet skis and guns. I don't know, whatever you want the purpose in it.
Pick something. Right.
Like, what do you think this place is supposed to be for?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it shuts them down, but I think it definitely doesn't have them like continue to like write page-long missives on my LinkedIn.
Right.
Page.
Yeah, I love that. I invite them to be on. I have another podcast. I'm not as active, but I just do that. I invite you to come on my podcast, and we'll live stream it, and we'll have a debate. Nice. No one has ever taken me up on it, and that's because it's just so much easier to be like a keyboard troll. Mm-hmm. And it's such a strange phenomena. What you're talking about there, where you do challenge them with that kind of like introspective question that is undeniable in its like weightiness. And Jesus was famous for doing this. He asked like 20 times more questions than he made statements, and these were questions of like deep introspection. And Buddha was famous for that too, and others. And it is its own kind of like spiritual test to be able to handle a question. And I love that one that you asked. That's a great like conversation. It's an invitation to have a conversation, but ends up being a conversation stopper. Mm-hmm. When most of these people, the hardcore people, are basically like karaoke singers. They're just are cut and pasting. Yeah. And I said this to somebody on Substack the other day. I said, I literally beg you to come up with something original. Just come back with something original than what you heard from somebody else and some other, I use a crude term of the instead of calling it an echo chamber, I call it a circle jerk, because it's a bunch of people facing the same direction, arriving at the same conclusion for no reason, no good reason. So crude, but kind of funny.
It is pretty funny. So. And by the way, I object to derogatory terms for karaoke because I love karaoke. I'm just going to say.
Well, okay. Maybe a cover band. Maybe that's what it is. It's a cover band. That's what they are. It's like, I know. I just tease you. I actually like karaoke too, especially Elvis. But anyway, so yeah, in that spirit of like, handling like challenges or things like that, it seems like you're kind of like in your own spiritual journey, you seem rather nonplussed by it. It doesn't seem to get to you. Does it ever get to you? Does something ever get to you where you sort of tip into like wanting to like throw down with some dumbass MAGA person? Stop smiling, Virginia. You know I'm asking a question.
No, not really. Like I have like good friends who like, hey, like I consider saying that a different way, and I'm like, oh, yeah, good idea. Like so, like, but I haven't had anybody that I know well be like, your disappointment kind of thing, like that sort of thing. Like,
it's not fun, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it doesn't really get to me. I mean, like, this is, I guess, kind of the gift of middle age, like, and especially the decades that we experienced. Like, we had all the fun. Like, there's no more like fun in the system than we had. And so for me, like, I'm like, if I die, I die. But like, for me, it's like I got this back half of life to play to try to make this place where you can have like honest fun. It doesn't hurt somebody. So there's no real attachment to my own kind of even my own survival. Like I don't have any responsibilities, no kids, no. I'm just going to live my truth and keep playing until the buzzer rings, basically.
Yeah. I think I hear you and I aspire to that. And that's why Brittany is smiling, because this is a constant conversation we have, because I do get hurt. I'm not hurt by strangers. Fuck them. I don't care. Like, I sometimes I'll engage because I find it entertaining. And B, sometimes it's much better to do the intellectual flex with a stranger, like it's like make an example of them. And maybe that's mean and I shouldn't, but I got Viking blood and I'm a Scorpio, so it's got to go somewhere, and, but it's with the people, and it makes me emotional. It's like the people that knew me before I had my spiritual awakening, coming from Christian fundamentalism. And, I was such an anomaly. And in our family chat, so I have two grown kids with my first partner. We say we collectively, our sons, and we all built one big happy family. But I think it was his birthday, and Lena, Caden's mom, my former wife, sent a picture of Logan as a baby with a T-shirt I got him that said, "I heart Rush Limbaugh."
Wow.
And because back then, I was a Rushy or whatever it was called, and and the fact that I have changed and evolved is so like it's like an egregious, like I've left something, whether it's the old fundamentalist Christian, weird culty Christian church, or the old like Rush Limbaugh Fox News crowd that I used to be a part of. And so I think that's why the vitriol is so strong towards me, because it is very personal, the attacks that I get from these people. I had an old mentor of mine, I haven't talked to him in 15 years, sent me a message on Facebook that said, I wonder, how did we do all that work together and then you lost all of your common sense? And I said back to him, I said, Larry, that's quite the thing to hear from someone I haven't heard from in 15 years.
Yeah.
That was my calm response, but inside that's just not fun. So thank you for kind of repositioning that. For me.
Well, Justin, you and I, and I think other men who are similar to us are mirrors for like the unrealized potential of lots of folks. And so that is very upsetting. They're like, wait a minute, you could be free. You can just say whatever you want. You don't have to like kowtow to some, whatever. Like, and so like that freedom is a threat. And that's just what it is. It's our penance for being free. Like we have to keep paying that tax.
Right. And I have settled it within myself that their psychosis about me is not my responsibility. So I'm working on my own reactions to it. I have an amazing partner. I got an amazing therapist, and not the same people. That'd be weird. And anyway, that's an aside, but that's where my heart went. So
thank you.
Virginia, you want to go from there?
I don't experience those things the same way, partly because I didn't make a big change. I have always been like this.
Yeah, you've always been like that, yeah.
Just growing and, getting a better version of myself as I go. But I do get reactions. I do get attacks. I was excommunicated by the church, and so that's a big attack. So the way I see it right now, and I don't know if this helps. I mean, we have talked about this, Justin, before, but if it helps other people that are listening right now that are saying like, how do I manage this? From a complexity science perspective, especially, the system only will react when a meaningful information hits it. Meaning that if whatever you're saying matters to the system and challenge it, and it becomes a little bit of a threat of the comfortable stability, it will fight back. It will react, and it reacts this way. The worst thing that can happen for people that want to change the way things are, is indifference, is radio silence, is nobody reacting to that. But the more reactions we have, both positive or negative, meaning that the system is listening and being shaken by it in one way or the other. And that's always good. And you mentioned, Brandon, that democracy is supported or sustained by consent. but that's not the same thing as consensus. We don't want consensus, really, because that leads to a stagnation. If everybody's thinking the same way, nobody's thinking at all. So we need the dissent. We need the debate. We need the discussions, the conversations that, let me see what I'm not seeing. Let's talk about this. Let's put it from a different angle. I mean, that is what enrich our evolution as humans, as brains, as collective brains. So it's having a dissent is actually a good thing. And so if you get someone that said, I disagree with you, I think it's very wise from both of you saying, like, let's talk seriously about this. I want to learn from a different perspective.
I would love
So
that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating that you have seen something or you're seeing something I'm not seeing. I cannot represent all the experiences. I can only represent my own and my own perspective. So I want to learn from other people. Unfortunately, and this is, you mentioned this, Brendan, as well, that some people, they're not really thinking from a different perspective, or they don't have their own opinion. It's just a very, I will say, unhealthy attachment to their personal and collective identity. So it is a threat. Any shake to their worldview is a direct threat to the most fundamental thing that we have as human, that is our sense of identity, the sense of self. And when you don't know who you really are, then you hang into, you cling into whatever has been attributed to you, the label that has been attributed to you, but that becomes your last name. That becomes your name. And if somebody's threatening that, then that is being taken personally. So it's not about opinions, it's not about thinking, it's not about growing, it's not about improving our worldview and our work. It's about, you're attacking me personally. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I just heard my name being mentioned. And, I'm going to react to that because I'm defending myself, not my ideas, not my beliefs, not my purpose or my way of contributing to a bigger society. So going back to what you were saying, Brandon, the more opportunities and courage we have as individuals to work and to really understand who we are and to reconciliate our true self with our ego, that is the defensive one, that is the ones that get triggered and fight back and doesn't even know how to spell things, or has a terrible grammar. The more we do that work, the easier and the more productive and the more constructive it's going to be to actually engage in dissent and discussions and debates. And that's where innovation happened. Innovation never happened from consensus. It happened from dissent. So we want that, but intelligently.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So go ahead with the last question for Brandon, please.
Okay, so the last question will be, based on the work that you're doing and the mission and the message that you're sharing, what would you like to see as a measurable, observable impact in your lifetime?
Well, let's just first want to say that our democracy in general, was born from the type of late night sitting around the campfire, dissent, passionate arguments. And that's a democratic tradition. You're supposed to be doing that. If you're not doing that, you're not really doing democracy.
Yeah.
So for me, I want the sparkle to come back in the American identity. Right now, everyone's like, oh, everything's so gross and it's too complex and it's bad. And specifically, and I've shared a little bit about this with y'all via email. So this summer is the National Pilgrimage, the very first one that is essentially a 6-week road trip to marinate in the soul and shadows of the United States, hitting these kind of key acupuncture points on the development of the collective psyche. And it is going to terminate in a People's Constitutional Convention. So this is going to be a different one than our first one, which was, all white men to the exclusion of Native folks, Black folks, and women. This is only going to be mothers who have buried a parent. So they're initiated into the mysteries of life and death. And we're going to put them in a room and watch them hash out what a constitution should look like. And so my hope is that the United States pays attention, that they end up following this pilgrimage, that they come on it, they visit us in all the different cities and national parks and all the places that we're stopping, and they start to get seduced by it. And in the way, the same intention with Bison Medicine, it's a seductive love letter, like, come on in, this is going to be great. So yeah, the measurable result would be that we have hope, tempered by honesty and humility on our 250th birthday, which is in July. And that we feel excited, like, oh wow, of course we have a broken contract. That just means we need a new one. So let's stop paying our taxes. Let's stop voting. Let's get a new constitution, because this ain't working. It's like a marriage that's on the rocks. Like, we're going to therapy or I'm out, kind of thing. And so that's my hope, that there's like a sparkle and a fight in the American people by July of this year.
Could you send me a link to that so we can put it in the show notes? Mm-hmm. Something, whatever, where people can find that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's National Pilgrimage.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And this is something I point out, I'll leave it with this, is the structure of the Constitution was designed for this in many ways. And we have evolved. It was, considering who wrote it, old, white landowners mostly, and that it's evolved, and that there's this group of people, this 20% that you're talking about, that reject that, largely based off of misinformation and lies. But there is a structure here that, if it was used, we've shown it works. Yeah. Anyway, so I like that answer. I like this idea that hope can be tangible. Like you can see it in people. Yeah. Well, we'll link to all your stuff and your books and everything. And thank you for this conversation. It's a fun way to spend. It's Friday afternoon here in Mexico City, same where you're at too. But it's a fun way to spend a Friday afternoon talking about this stuff. Thank you.
Very inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandon. We're going to say goodbye to you, and we're going to have the second show. And thanks for joining us today. All right. Well, like I thought, that was a very different conversation. It was much more heart touching than I thought it would be. So, but
also very timing, timing, very inspiring. Yeah, it's beautiful. I will read the book now. Exactly. I love that. I'm so glad I asked the question, because all the explanation behind it makes so much sense, and it was very inspiring. I have I think I share a lot of my thoughts and my reactions during the conversation, so I don't have much more to say. But I love the idea of talking about free will. What he mentioned about free will, and it's true. We full our mouth about, like, this is my free will. I'm free to do whatever I want, and this is what I really believe. I will invite everybody to ask themselves, if really, how really free will are you exerting if you're not in control of your ego and your mind? Yeah. Who is making that decision for you? I remember that in many of the presentations I do about the indomable mindset, which is the kind of mindset that is really being managed both your thoughts and your ego and your emotions by your true self. When I explain, when I teach, when I speak about the indomable mindset, I usually talk about the power of emotions and the ego, and how those emotions that you cannot control, and in this case you can see the envy, anger, fear, frustration, I mean, you name it, all those emotions that you cannot control are being used to control you. Yeah. And therefore, how can you assert that you have a free will?
Right.
If somebody is controlling you, if somebody can triggers you to react in certain way, not to respond, to react in certain way, that group, that person, that force, that ideology, that paradigm is really controlling what you call is your free will. And is challenging to think that way, but I think is very important that we ask ourselves how free I am when I make my decisions. I'm how conscious, how aware, how consciously consent. You know, like am I giving a conscious consent to whatever is happening or to whatever I'm saying or doing? Or is something else managing me as a puppet to talk, to react, to behave this way?
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting, even like the concept of, you know, if someone's intellectual, if someone's here's a statement that's articulate and well thought out, or even like get backed by information, and your reaction is both juvenile and emotional, you're not ready to have that conversation. And that's why I don't do that. Like if somebody's like, yo, you're a piece of shit, like how dare you? And it's usually, like you said, full of typos and grammar issues and everything. It's kind of funny but not funny. And then it goes back to what Jesus said, woe, or in King James language, woe unto you who take offense. He did not say woe unto you who give offense. It was to get offended. Getting offended is your ego being pricked. In that kind of way, ego kind of offense. And I kind of mentioned this when we were talking with Brandon, is, first of all, people that have been oppressed we come from traditionally marginalized or oppressed cultures, know far more about U.S. history than the average white person. That should say everything to you, and they're not the ones like, we're going to bring Christopher Columbus back. It's like, how fucking stupid are you to even think that? Or when the Washington, it was called the Washington Redskins, and they changed it to the Washington Commanders, and they're like, I don't know why people are so offended. It's like, because the people that it's about don't like that. That isn't represent. They don't like the way it's represented. So this split, though, goes all the way back. And this is the thing where, if you study U.S. history, there was this natural law aspect of it, but there was also, it wasn't called this, but it was really white supremacy that it came from the Vatican. There's a statement that European Christians were supposed to rule the world. Very few people know that. That became the Manifest Destiny, which is interestingly marketed in schools back when I was a kid as some sort of like good thing. No, and the Manifest Destiny said it was God's blessing that you enslave and inflict genocide. But you say that to somebody that doesn't have enough emotional intelligence to handle their worldview being challenged, they immediately attack you personally. Call you a traitor, you're woke, liberal, libtard, blah, blah, blah. And it's not worth the fight, because I'm not going to fight with it it's like fighting with a drunk chimpanzee. Like, why would I do that? And then the other thing that I thought of too is, there's been a concentrated effort by the right wing for many years, but especially in the last 10 years. They have attacked social emotional intelligence education. So when you and Brandon were talking about this should be a human right, like to learn these things, they specifically go after the curriculum that teaches social emotional intelligence. The second thing is they removed philosophy from the required curriculum back in, I think, the late 80s. And they also removed comparative religion. And so if you're afraid of what people might learn, maybe you're the problem, like it's
I think it's not fear. I think it's not fear. I think it's
just control.
Intentional. Yeah, I mean, the Romans did that. The circus is keep people ignorant and entertained.
Right.
Or busy fighting about, superficial things. And that's the easiest way to dominate a population. Is the easiest way.
Yes. And even that, though, too, is you take this, you hear this all the time from, shut up and sing. Or shut up and play ball. Politics and sports don't go together. Politics and music don't go together. I don't want to hear that. And then like with Kendrick last year in the Super Bowl and now Bad Bunny, how dare you bring this person in? And all the people that, just the level of stupidity, like we need to get an American. It's an American sport. He is an American, you fucking idiot. Like it's so stupid. And if it wasn't so dangerous, it would be funny. It would be funny. It would be like the movie Idiocracy. And the last thought I had too is you could see this. I think Brandon was a great example of this. Is consciousness does not make you take a side. It makes you take a stand. It's a spectrum of conscious to unconscious. And it's not the absence of ego. It's, as you talk about, it's ego mastery. You don't want ego death. You need your ego to do
It's
shit.
not possible.
It's not possible anyway, unless you psilocybin bomb your brain and go live in a cave. Even then, it's not ego death. It's just like you have nothing provoking you. And so seeing how he talked about this like if elevating consciousness, or I would say using your terms, like it's like reaching a state of this indomably mindset. That is it's almost like it is a necessary step if you want to lead the future of something. You have to do that inner work. And, we're on a grand stage of watching a group of deeply, deeply damaged people be given hierarchical power. And history shows this, they always use it to hurt other people. Yeah. Anyway, so it was inspiring. And it also made me sad, like how far we have to go still, but I'm glad there are people like Brandon, like that.
And you know what, Justin, we're listening more and more people talking about consciousness and mastering the mind and ego mastery and doing the inner work than ever before. So there is hope in that, meaning at least people are becoming more aware that this is something that is not optional anymore, that is a must.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the only way forward.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is that there is a binary thing. It's binary on a little spectrum, and that is it's conscious or unconscious. And there are plenty of low conscious left wingers too. We can talk about that, but it's more like that's the spectrum. It's not ideological, and I say ideological mean left right, or it's not that. It's your level of consciousness. And I will say this too, as my final thing. No one has ever had an elevation of consciousness and not thought about social justice. Jesus taught that, Buddha taught that. Everybody that teaches consciousness for real, the real spiritual masters, there's a social justice component. So if you don't want to change a system that harms people and you think you're conscious, you're not. You're something.
Or that you believe in any religion. Maybe you're not.
Maybe you're not. Yeah. So, okay. Anything else? All right. That was, like I said to him, fun way to spend a Friday afternoon. I'm such a dork. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Massive Change Show. I said this on the last episode, but we're looking to meet more entrepreneurs that are out taking a stand against fascism and human rights, using their brand to take a stand. Please introduce us. There's a link in the show notes to do that. And thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this podcast. And we'll see you down the road.